Well, all right, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the mighty manslayer, the scourge of God, the perfect warrior, the master of thrones and crowns, known to his people as Genghis Khan, and you may know him as Genghis Khan. So, Kevin, you're excited? I know you are.
I am excited. I'm big fan. Big fan. I mean, if you want to talk about like mass murderers and stuff like that,
He's king.
he is the top of the list. Like uh, Hitler got about 12 million, give or take. Stalin was responsible for about 20 million, but Genghis Khan beat all of them. He's right up there. And now we don't really know exactly how many people he was responsible
But it
for
was more than
killing.
five.
It
More
was
than
it was a
five.
lot, yeah.
Yeah.
And just like Stalin, he didn't physically kill every one of these people, but his madness
Orders
was
or his
kind of like right
decision.
in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
his jam. Um, Now a lot of good things actually came from
Yes.
Genghis Khan, and he
That is
actually did,
surprising, but it is true.
yeah, did actually advance civilization, um, in a way. Um,
Yes.
he Right, so he revitalized the Silk Road, and
Yeah.
trade from Eastern China to as far as Italy was opened up
Right.
by what he did. Um, he incorporated a lot of trade routes that really kind of brought globalization into like a real idea, like a real thing. Before that, it was basically what you had was what you grew and built and made yourself in your community. And he really started spreading things out. Trade between Europe and Asia, which had never really been a thing.
Yeah.
So
No, they,
there's a
they
lot of
said
good things
when
you
he
can say
moved.
about him. There's a lot of bad
Yep.
things you can say about him.
They said when he moved his troops, you measured in latitude and longitude instead
Hmm.
of in miles.
Right.
That's how big and how vast his armies were.
Hmm.
But so he
He didn't
actually
start
he
out with a massive army, though, did he?
no, he did not. So let's kind of go back there, back to the beginning. So he was born in 1162.
Hmm.
That's a few years back. That's back
Right.
before the hills got dusty.
Yeah.
Um, so
Just after a little, a couple hundred years after Rome started really collapsing.
right, and that's it. It kind of left a power vacuum. But all right. So when he's born, you gotta kind of understand the nomad people here, the Mongol. Sorry, it's that nomad lifestyle. Is I guess what I'm going for. But the people here were very a different mindset. They were very about survival. The Gobi
Hmm.
Desert is a brutal place. So, yeah, you kind of have grass and you have pretty fields, but that's
Hmm.
kind of all you have.
Right. And you
And
can
you're like,
herd animals and raise animals, but you have to move like great
to
distances
keep
because there's not enough to
right.
in 100 acres or 200 acres. There's not enough to feed any real animals, so you have to keep moving to
Right.
new locations to provide
So,
enough food and water.
and I mean, because there's such nothing there, you're actually making your fires out of like animal dung.
Hmm.
You're just
Right.
burning your crap because that's all you got.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like that. And everything is like you're all about the milk from the animals that you got, the horses, the sheep, the whatever.
Hmm.
The goats. You're just drinking milk and eating meat, and that's pretty much life.
Right.
Um, so anyway, the man is kind of the center of the family because he's kind of the warrior kind of thing. So when it comes to like sitting around the fire, getting food, the end of the day, right? The man is up there getting his. then the wife gets hers, then the kids, then the dogs. But the kids are not really taken care of.
Right.
In tradition, I mean, obviously, I don't know, I wasn't there, but the tradition at the time was kind of, if they can't take care of themselves and feed themselves by three or four, then
Right.
they're not going to make it.
Yeah. The weak don't survive in that
It
climate.
doesn't, yeah. So it's kind of a different, brutal time, you know.
Right.
They had, kids at 3 and 4 are like riding sheep, and
Right.
it's kind of a crazy
Yeah.
world and different than you imagine.
Kind of
So,
like the Spartans.
right,
The Spartans, they would dispose of children that were not healthy. Um, in Mongolia and in this culture, they would just die just because. So it
yes,
was like 50% of the kids that were born made it to adulthood. It wasn't,
right,
it wasn't given that you were gonna make it. Daddy got
right,
the big piece of chicken,
yeah.
then mom, then the kids after that.
And that's it. So, like, in a way, I mean, there's definitely been cultures that women didn't have such a significant role in the family as they did here. Typically, the men would go out and do warring, and the women would handle every aspect of the household, kind of thing. But another thing about this whole nomadic lifestyle was that they don't really care about possessions. And that kind of follows Genghis Khan throughout his reign, I guess.
Hmm.
He's not about capturing big things for, oh, look, I have this shiny building. Oh, look, I
Hmm.
have this, big castle, whatever. It's all kind of, hey, I just got my tent and I'm good, you know?
Hmm. Right.
But what he did find important was loyalty.
Hmm.
And now, obviously, there was and he might have found having sex is important too. Kevin, you had mentioned a couple of weeks ago that perhaps
He
um,
impregnated a lot of women.
he
Yeah.
impregnated a lot of women. Now, my
So
wife would
it
point
was
out this
over
is
a
a bad thing.
thousand.
Yes,
Over 1,000 women had his kids, and a lot of those women had more than one. And they
yes.
say modern population in the world 0.5%. So half of 1% of everybody is the every man in the world
They
is a
use the word
descendant of Genghis
direct.
Khan.
They use the word direct descendant.
Right.
I
Your
don't know what
dad's
that
dad's dad.
distinction is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it goes a few more if we're getting back to 1200, but
Yeah, it's a little bit more than your great grandpa, but it it
yeah. But you
it
get the
goes
idea.
goes back. Yeah. He
Yeah.
was
They
he
say
was
1 in 200.
yeah, exactly. He was blowing loads. Um but what to bring it back to what you said, the thing of the having awesome stuff, he wasn't into that really.
No.
But in that culture, the way you make friendships and bonds is through gift giving. And
Yes.
so that actually served him well, because when he got an expensive gift or expensive loot, he actually brought it to other tribes and gave it to them, and was like, through that and through warfare, he was able to unite uh, almost all of the Mongolian tribes into
Yes.
a large army. And that's really how he started. Was he had gotten a sable coat, um, for for something he had done for one tribe, and he took it to another tribe and gave it to their leader to unify the clans. And that's kind of how he built his first small army. And from there, they started building their way up over
So
one coat made out of sable.
that's pretty awesome. And so
Hmm.
it started out early. Um, he actually kind of became his own man and took over his tribe at 13 years old. His clan is what you call it.
Hmm.
Um, and what it was, he had there's a story about like him killing his half brother over a fish, but basically the idea was his brother was stealing food from the family, is the way the story kind of conveys.
Hmm.
And I read somewhere that he had, it was a pride thing, like he said he caught it, so he had to kill him, whatever, it was whatever.
Right.
Um, but the bottom line is,
Yeah.
when he's 9, there's some discrepancy in the age, somewhere between 9 and 13. I believe 9 years. Oh, I know what it was. He was 13. He found a cute young lady in a neighbor tribe who was 9 years old,
Hmm.
and her dad was kind of like,
Young lady, 9 years old, young lady.
he's kind of handsome, so I
Hmm.
think I accept him for my daughter, but not yet. She's a little young. Let's wait till she's 13. And he ends up, taking this woman for his wife or whatever, and is actually with this same woman until he dies. Um,
Hmm.
Now, Kevin might point out that it's not the only woman that he's with until he dies,
Right.
but she's consistently there and handling business. Um, anyway, so he's over there hanging out with the soon to be father in law, and his dad's back at the camp. His dad gets poisoned. Turns out there's a lot of poisoning going on. Now, I don't
Yeah.
know if they're just eating bad meat and they think everybody's poisoning them,
Right.
or if somebody's actually like got a jar of poison and they're going from place to
Yeah. No,
place.
I imagine that food handling and cleanliness was not like at the top of the list when it comes to the Mongolians.
Now, his name when he was born is Temujin, and it actually means of iron, and
Hmm.
that could be why he made it past the poisoning. His dad, not so much. So, who knows? But um, anyway, so moving right along here, his dad gets poisoned, and everybody in his tribe kind of just bolts. They grab what they can grab, and they're like, "We're not
Take
going to
off.
be
Right.
reigned by a
Leave him with
13-year
his.
old. He's not going to
Yeah.
handle it." And a few do stay,
Yeah.
but a lot of
But
them
he's
take
got
off.
basically his mom and his stepmom that he's got to take care of,
Right.
along
And
with his
then
younger sisters.
they decide, hey, other people, other tribes, not his dad's tribe. Other tribes are like, we're going to track this guy down and kill him. And so he runs off. He's being chased for, forever. He ends up hiding out in a creek, and a guy comes by, and one of the people searching for him, and the guy kind of like looks right in his eyes, and he sees him, and the guy doesn't say anything and keeps going on. So he's like,
Hmm.
you know what? I think I got an ally there. And he actually sneaks into the camp of the people hunting him, takes a bunch of food because come on, and then
Right.
finds the guy and is like, hey, you got to help me. I know you got my back. And the guy's like, well, I had your back not to turn you in. I'm not sure I got your back to, stand up to people. But they end up working it out. The two of them stand up. He does end up getting captured soon after, and they put him in this thing called a Kang, and I could not find a picture or figure out what the hell they're talking about.
Okay.
Best I can tell from the description of the story, it's kind of like stocks, like
Mm.
you used to put the guy in. So I think it's that bar, like you put on an ox,
Right.
and yeah,
Okay.
you know, maybe if I put the chat on, somebody else knows. I don't know. Anyway, um, the anyway, they got that bar, I think, over his back, and he ends up smacking somebody in the head, taking him out, and they do get him cut out, and he goes through it for a while. Anyway, bottom line, rises up, takes power, starts, building and building. And but the idea is he earned every bit. He didn't get anything handed to him. This kid, came out of nowhere. But it
Right.
does seem like his family was respected, up to this point, but it kind
Right.
of had
But
all
once his
fallen
father
apart.
died, yeah,
Right.
exactly. Exactly. Everything had fallen apart when he was a child, and he had to start from scratch.
Yeah. Um so then let me see what else I got here. He said when we can we plunder, when we cannot we hide away. If we begin to build towns and change our old habits, we shall not prosper. But monasteries and temples breed mildness of character, and it is only the fierce and warlike who will dominate mankind.
Mm-hmm.
That's what his uncle had told him, and he kind of took it as his mantra.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was it. They said when his armies would roll in, every bug, insect, everything would kind of move out of the way, ahead of his horses because they just trampled every bit of everything.
Right.
And they just left a wake of kind of devastation and nothing. Now, Kevin had mentioned that he basically helped create a big change in the modern world. And they say he kind of like led to the Renaissance, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of that kind of came to be because of what he had done. Um, so the Silk Road, that trade route, they said that they used to tell stories that you could walk from one end, from the ocean over there by China, all the way to Italy with a a bowl on your head, and nobody would mess with you because
Mm-hmm.
he secured it and ensured, that trade route. And
Right.
that's kind of an
Right. And
awesome
if you were
feat.
to, yeah, if you
Yeah.
were to use that trade route, you had to get direct permission from him. Like you, not just everybody got to go safely back and forth. You had to have permission. So it was only allies or, people that had given him gifts that were actually able to use that trade route. And other people obviously did, but
Right.
it was basically like you got to get it permission from Genghis Khan to use these trade routes. And it's actually interesting because before he started doing conquering things that were outside of the steppe region, he was actually setting up trade routes in Mongolia. Um,
Okay.
and that's when they started to like find out, like people were coming up from China and finding out about all these cities and silk and the wealth that they had, and they had roads that went over rivers, like preposterous stuff, And
Yeah.
he started hearing these stories about all this wealth that was just sitting out there, ready to be taken, and
Nice.
that's kind of whet his appetite.
And that's it. And so he just kept expanding and expanding. Now, again, it's kind of conflicting. Kevin started out saying he's a murderer. Well, no shit, he killed between 5 and 10% of the world.
Hmm.
That's pretty significant. So,
Yeah.
as far as mass murder and genocide kind of thing, that's but on the flip side of that, it kind of is different because it wasn't like, well, I hate you because you're Jewish.
Hmm.
Um, it was basically he would roll into an area and said, "Hey, you're gonna join up with me," and they'd be like, "Well, I really," and they'd be like, "No, no," and
We're done
then
now.
he'd just roll over.
Took too long.
Um, yeah, nah, I mean, it wasn't even as much as that. He would actually send a messenger out ahead, and
Hmm.
and they would go in and say, "Hey, Genghis is coming, and you guys need to, come along with us. We either join or die, kind of thing." You might
Right.
note it from a American Revolution. Maybe that's where it came from. I don't know. They were like, "Hey, we'll be like Genghis,
Yeah.
join or die."
Join or die.
Um, so that's kind of where that came from. I mean, that mindset, right?
Hmm.
I'm sure people had been saying that since the beginning of time. It's
Right.
probably like a Cain Abel kind of thing. But anyway, I'm gonna give it to him. I'm gonna give it to Genghis. So anyway, this guy, he would roll in. So and he'd basically be join or die. And that's how his armies got so vast and so giant. Because he just encompassed everybody. But it kind of not horrible for you. Again, it's that culture change that people can't deal with of I have to accept somebody else's ways and I have my own. And society, the world has dealt with that in so many ways. I know a story of India when England took over India. They hated England. and we're like,
Hmm.
this is the most horrible thing. And now there's colleges and libraries and whatever. Now you can argue, well, it's not really better. They destroyed their culture, and the modern way is not exactly a great way. And I can understand the way governments play out and things like that. It's not necessarily a great improvement, but the quality of life in India is dramatically better. But they hated what they went through to get there.
Right.
And the little side story there is because I think that a lot of that was the same thing. um Genghis would take all the doctors and the scholars, and he actually would send them to different areas of his control to share their ideas.
Hmm.
Like, he really was about huge developing. So it
Hmm.
was a painful, ugly thing. But on the flip side, like Kevin had mentioned earlier, is it really helped grow and develop and made things better in time. Um, you know, uh, so then we have China. Now there's this whole other thing.
Right.
Pretty much China started building walls. You may have heard stories about this. It's pretty much this guy. They were like,
Mm.
we don't need any of that crap coming here. Um, so Beijing, they had built a 40-foot wall completely around Beijing.
Hmm.
And they were like, no, we're not gonna, go to your bend to your will.
Hmm.
So the
And
Khan was having a
let's
time.
let's let's be
Yeah.
clear here. This is we're talking about 1100, 1200 AD. China was advanced.
Yes.
Like, their science and their math and their building techniques were far past what Europe had developed in this time. Europe is like the minor leagues at this point. China is like, globally. China is the wealthiest and most developed country in the world, and it wasn't, obviously wasn't China at that point, but it was the uh, you know it was the same location is what we're talking about.
It wasn't the People's Republic.
It was not the People's Republic then, but
Okay.
but it was the most developed place in the world at that point.
Yes. And that's, I mean, and obviously you could say, well, you know what, Chuck, a lot of great stuff was probably lost because the Khans went in and destroyed it. And that may be true, but I would say if you were a better warrior, maybe you could have kept your stuff. I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, right?
Hmm.
That's really what it comes down to. So anyway, the Khan, he surrounds Beijing, and they're like, you know what? How about we just cut off all their supplies and we just wait them out? So Beijing ends up resorting to like cannibalism. It's
Right.
that
Right.
bad, right?
Was
They're
it was about a
decimating
year
inside.
year and a half, right? That they were walled up in their city,
And
and
yeah,
they start running out of food, and it starts getting like pretty desperate.
and basically at that point they do end up, just destroying the whole thing, and they take it down. They say that there weren't even bones left, that just once they kind of went through, they just trample and destroy
Complete
everything back to
complete
dust.
destruction, right?
um
And now
complete. Yeah, go ahead.
now Genghis Khan had conquered this massive city and all the surrounding areas at this point.
Yes.
And you would think, all right, dude, now it's time to start drinking and banging chicks. Not Genghis Khan, though. He turned around and went back to the steeps because that's what he wanted. That's what he liked. He didn't want a palace. He didn't want, a great walled city. He didn't want gold and wealth.
Yeah.
What he wanted was his home and his lifestyle. And they went back to the steeps after conquering almost all of Asia at this point. It was still, still early. He was still a young man, but he went back to the lifestyle he had lived, the nomadic
Right.
lifestyle he had lived, even though he was extremely wealthy at this point and ruled everything that he could find, everything that anybody had created in all this time. He was in control of it. He still decided to go back to his nomadic lifestyle because that's what he preferred until the next stage of
His next plunder, right?
his
And
next
that's the
plunder.
thing.
Right.
He went through the Muslim world, destroyed
Hmm.
them. The Chinese, destroyed them. Went through Russia, destroyed them. all of Europe feared him. It depends, how far. There was a big ocean sea in the way that kind of
Right.
slowed things down there. But basically, this guy ends up conquering 10 million square miles. That's the size of Africa.
Hmm.
So he commands a fair amount of the world at this point.
Right. So
Um,
so um
yeah.
the it was the largest contiguous empire
Okay.
with 10 million square miles. Now, it was second to British in total landmass. 1920, the British had gotten up to 13.7 square miles of their empire
Ooh.
in 1920. That was their peak.
Okay.
So, up until this point, it was the majority of the world. It was, I mean, if you think about where civilizations were and what cities existed and what nations existed, it was the majority of the world at that point.
Right. And so he actually brought though religious tolerance. He was like, "Oh, you can be whatever you want to be for his people." He was
Right.
against slavery, but work with me, against slavery for anybody in his world,
Mhm.
right? So you couldn't take another, one of your fellow cohorts, we'll say citizens, whatever,
Mhm.
and slavery. What you did with people that were your enemies. I don't know that he pretty much they just like annihilated everybody though. I don't really know
Right.
of
They didn't
any
enslave people necessarily. If
necessarily,
either
but
you
it
were his
wasn't a
friend or you
rule,
were
right?
dead. Right.
He also set up a legal system that, believe it or not, was consistent throughout this whole area,
Mhm.
which it's all pretty amazing when you think of what he was able to accomplish. And then when you think of he accomplished this on horseback,
Right.
I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
let's get into some of his wild shit that he did, because he wasn't,
Mm.
you know, he was a you know, a fierce warrior. They said he was the greatest warrior, that of his time, or maybe that ever existed himself personally. But also the people that worked for him were wild people, and they had a rule against shedding the blood of royalty. Um,
Okay.
so that means that you can't stab them or chop their heads off or anything. That doesn't mean you can't kill them though. So
What?
there was one guy that was complaining about that he wasn't getting his fair share of wealth. One of the Chinese kings. And so
Okay.
they gave him silver. They gave him all sorts. They actually um, tied him up and melted the silver and poured it into his eyes and his ears, and he had as much silver as he wanted. Um,
He
a
got it
lot of the
all, huh?
times, yeah, a lot of the times the royalty would get their necks broken because that was didn't shed their blood. Um, when they invaded into Russia, um, they captured the royalty and they built like a log cabin style box, right? And put all the royalty in there. And then they built a platform that was just kind of free floating on top of the people.
Okay. Nice.
And they got on top of that platform and they just had
A
a
party.
massive party. Just party, just party on top of that platform, crushing the royalty the whole time. And by the time they were done, all of the royalty of Russia had been crushed to death under this platform. They just had a big feast and got drinking, and eventually, over time, the weight of this just crushed everybody under. They couldn't get out the sides, and they just were all smashed to death by it because they're ballers. That's how ballers act.
That's how it
You
is.
just you just gotta party until your enemies die, and that's how they did it in that instance. Now, um, uh, Genghis Khan was um, a Spartan person. If you wanted to use that word, he did not indulge in anything. His one vice was that he liked alcohol. He liked to drink, and I ain't hating. You know,
Now you
I mean, girls and alcohol kind of go
ah, yeah,
together, I guess, when
girls.
you're a baller.
Girls
But
may have been,
right,
may have been another vice, but I don't know if he saw it as a vice. I don't know.
right. But
I,
he was not a living in palaces type
no,
of guy. He wasn't
no Lamborghinis for this guy.
right, right. So
Now, yeah,
so
that's
with it's a
yeah,
rough lifestyle, and most people in that lifestyle don't make it to 40. You know what I mean? You have
yeah,
kids and then you die. That's basically how it goes. Um, and he lived a rough lifestyle his whole life, and not because he was reckless with his indulgences, but
right,
because just riding on a horseback, being short of food, being short of water, um, it's a reckless lifestyle.
yeah.
But
It's definitely a hard road, and he survived, brutality. Um, the thing is, I think the takeaway that I kind of get from all of this is, I mean, the guy commanded loyalty. He made a decision, and he just kind of followed through. I think people respect. I think you're able to grow your empire when people have something to believe in. Um, Consistency rules. Now, but again, like Kevin had mentioned, he didn't acquire wealth. I mean, for himself, it was all about hey, let me take care of the people, and that loyalty goes both ways. It's not
right,
it's not the same thing to have loyalty when you rule with an iron fist and it's just fear,
right,
and they just, well, I do what he says because otherwise my head's going to come off. Well, yeah, that kind of is loyalty, but what we're talking about here is maybe even respect. That
right.
mutual both ways loyalty is, I think, what really led to his giant empire. It was just sharing and being the right thing. I mean, really, I think Genghis Khan, I think sharing and caring. It's kind of like Barney, right? This guy is all about, hey, let me share the love. Let me all this great stuff that I have. We're gonna have it with everybody. So
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Um, now,
Somebody. Yeah. Go ahead.
now, um, Now let's talk about some of the badass stuff that happened with Genghis Khan. We talk about all the good things he did. Well, let's talk about some of the other stuff. There was a European traveler that was going with a caravan of supplies, and he was going um, to meet Genghis Khan and ask for access to trade routes. And as he was traveling there, he came across this place, and it just stunk like death. And he said there was like a weird slimy mud everywhere. And as they were traveling, they could see a white mountain ahead of them, like a snow-capped mountain. And as they got closer, they realized that it was a mountain made out of human bones, skulls.
They refer to it as a pyramid.
Right. And the slimy mud that he had been traveling through were decomposing bodies that had just been left out, rotting for months and months. And he was just they were getting their wagon stuck in the slime of decomposing bodies.
Nice.
Like if you opposed him and tried to keep your cities out of him and overpower him, you suffered consequences, seriously. It is like malt liquor Monday guy. You know what they would do is they would when they were traveling and uh, they were short on food, they would take fermented milk and mix it with the blood of their horses,
Yeah.
um, and that would be what they would live on when there was no food available. Um, but
Yeah.
they were wild people and did wild stuff, and the way that they killed people was just like, and they were very creative about it. They were very creative when it came to killing people. It's one thing to kill somebody in battle, but it's another thing when you capture people and they're still, they had defied you to begin with. You have to
Right.
like set an example. right? That's how he saw it. You have to make a point and show everybody what's going to happen when you're not uh, willing to capitulate to the Mongolians, and there was no stopping it. Um, Now, he one of his best features was that um, he was very good at uh, picking capable generals. You know what I mean? He was
Yeah.
very good at picking people that were good at warfare and putting in places of authority. And it didn't have to be like, his it wasn't like a hereditary thing where like it was his cousin or, his son. It was people that were best at what they were doing. And even when he went into
Right.
battle against other people, he would pick out their best warriors, and he might kill everybody else, but he would keep those warriors and uh, put them in charge of military units under his command. Um, One of the stories is that he had his horse killed out from underneath him from an arrow from an archer. And after the battle, that archer came up to him and said, "I'm the one that killed your horse, and I want to work for you." And he put him to work. Gave him a position. Um, he was very good at picking out people that were good at that type of lifestyle that they were living and incorporating them into his own military. And that's how he built such a powerful military and such a large military, um, was by not killing off the people that were his greatest threats and his greatest enemies, making them his friends or you know his employees basically.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I think one of the biggest things, I mean, you could argue for somebody to dominate the world um like he did, there probably was a lot of pride and whatever, but it seemed like consistently he was able to put that aside and, make the decisions that would help him, survive and benefit everything. It seemed like he was able to put his own pride aside in order to gain what he wanted, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And that's not exactly common with other people. And I mean, this guy was able to hold his reign throughout his entire life. That's an impressive feat. Um, so anyway, he eventually does succumb to illness at the end. I
No, before
didn't.
that though,
Oh, wait. No, I'm getting ahead. Sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead.
before that though, he realized he was getting old, and eventually he knew, like everybody else, he was going to die. But also, he was the most powerful man in the world at this point, and if the most powerful man puts his mind to it, maybe he can solve the issue of aging. Maybe you can solve immortality. And so he started
Yes,
working on
we
this.
did.
Now we've all heard the story of the epic of Gilgamesh and all these stories about great rulers seeking out immortality. I mean, Jeff
Yes.
Bezos is doing it right now, trying to figure out how to stop aging. I
Right.
mean, if you're super rich, why not, right? Start working on that stuff. What, you're already a baller. Why not make this shit go forever? So he sent out his some of his men to go to the far corners of his empire and find the oldest people he could find and bring them back to him. So they tracked down a 600-year-old monk, and they brought him back to Genghis Khan. And now this is the stories we're hearing from 1,000 years ago. I don't know how accurate it is that the dude was uh, actually 600 years old, but I mean, he was believable, and he brought him back, and what the monk had told him was that it's not possible to achieve immortality, but it is possible to live a lifestyle that's going to bring you to a great age like he was. And they actually became pretty good friends. Um, now, um, Genghis Khan was a semi-religious man, and his religion was Tengrism. Um, Tengri was the god, was the sky god, and like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, it was a monotheistic religion. So he basically believed in God, just like the Jews did, just like the Muslims did, um, just like the Christians did. And he the idea is that Tengri was not actually like a god, like a deity, like we think of, but it was more of a personification of the universe. And the idea was that um, the religion basically said that the greatest achievement would be to become one with the universe, to unify yourself. And it's believed by the Mongolians that Genghis Khan was a personification of Tengri, and he was basically a perfect person living in harmony with the environment. And you can see that
Right.
by the fact that he would capture great wealth and things like that, but he still lived a Spartan lifestyle. He still ate and drank small amounts, small quantities, except for when it came to alcohol.
Well,
He was a bit of a lush when it came
I
to
mean,
that
aren't
sort of
we all the
stuff.
victim here? I
Yeah.
mean, that's
So now, at one point when he was attacking China, he became deathly ill, um, and he had a sorcerer come to
mm,
him, and the only way to cure him of his illness was that somebody else would have to sacrifice his life.
that's
So,
fair. That's fair.
I mean, but it had to be a willing sacrifice. So one of his best buddies, I think it was a cousin, um, said, "Listen, dude, I'll do this. I'm all in on Genghis Khan. The only the only thing you have to do is make sure you take care of my mother after I die, because I won't be here to do it." So so the guy was killed ritualistically, and Genghis Khan was healed. His illness went away, and he was cured. Um, this would later
Nice.
come back and bite the Mongolians in the ass, though, because
Uh-oh.
later on, 100 years, or 20 years or so after his death, his mother had started having people assassinated, and there was
Mm,
nothing anybody could do about it, because she was already, like, she had, she was the condition that person had used to save his own life, and she took advantage of that.
mm.
But at the same time, I don't know, maybe black magic works. I don't know what's up with that, but it worked out for him.
Right?
So so there was a lot of people view him as like some sort of a monster or something like that, but he was a very religious person, in the sense that, yeah, I mean, obviously their religion was not the same as ours, but um I don't know, but some of their religious magic worked in that case.
Maybe if somebody had shared the gospel of Jesus Christ with,
Well, and
you
I'm
know,
going to tell you something. They
tell
actually
me.
did. The
Oh, they
Pope
did.
wrote the Pope wrote a letter to
Okay.
Genghis Khan, saying that he wanted peace. Like, you don't have to, like, come into Europe. Don't, like, come into Europe and start doing, like, weird,
Yeah, whoa, whoa,
crazy
whoa.
shit. Like, just settle down here. But the thing is, with the Mongolian language, there's no word for peace. The only word for peace is the same as the word for subjugation. Like, if you want peace, that means I want to be your subject.
Yeah.
Um, and Genghis Khan wrote a letter back to the Pope, and basically what the letter said was that, um, you've obviously been wicked and uh, done wrong in the eyes of God, because I'm God's wrath, and I've come to destroy you.
But
basically the most badass letter you could write is be like, you want peace and that's fine. Um, but
maybe you shouldn't have been an
yeah,
ass. Yeah.
you've disobeyed God and now he's sent me to destroy you. And seems like legit. They sent a massive massive amounts of gold and silver to keep him from like, just don't come over the mountains. You know what I'm saying? Just stay over
Yeah.
there. We'll send you money.
Send
And
me cash and
yeah,
look, the check's in the mail, and I'm just gonna get more in the collection plate. I'm gonna tell them to dig really deep, and we'll
yeah,
send it your way.
we'll get this together. Yeah,
We'll work it out. Now, what one of the comments here was about, back to his brutal killings, was at some point, there was an article. One of the comments here was that they would they ran out of arrows and they would tie people together, and so that way they would all drown together if they
right.
shot
They'd
just
shoot him
one.
on the
And
edge of a bridge. Yeah,
carry the other guy. It only makes sense. That there's always more ways to be creative. And I feel like if you're not involving your creative spirit, then you just kind of
right,
die anyway. So you got
right.
to always be thinking
Right.
and,
No,
work
it's kind of
outside.
like it's kind of like a great society without art doesn't it can't exist. You have to be artistic
I
with the
can't.
ways you kill people. You
Yes.
know? You have to
Yes.
be
You
creative.
know,
It's that creative
that
spirit that really drives what's important to the human soul. And being creative with your
exactly.
killing is great. And yeah, I mean, you have to be somewhat artistic to build a massive pyramid that people think are mountains from a distance, out of skulls and human bones. I mean, you can't just throw them all in a pile. You know what I mean? It's just going to keep falling down. If it's going to be big enough that people think it's a mountain, then you have to really like think about the placement of these bones and the jaws and the skulls. I mean, femurs are really good for building structures like that, and you have to think about that when you're,
You got a plan,
you know, when you're building a sculpture like that.
right? I mean,
Artists are important.
exactly. So he ends up dying while he's off in battle one day, and again, it's illness that takes him.
Hmm.
Nobody took out the Khan. And what they did was they didn't want word to get out and kind of be overrun. They wanted him to be able to be returned and put his body, where he wanted to be buried,
Right.
back where he was born, basically in that same valley.
Hmm.
And so they wanted to head back. Basically, everybody they came across, they just killed them because they didn't want word to get out. So they were like, no. And so anyway, they take him back, they put him down, but right before he died, he supposedly had the dying quote. Everybody's got a quote from all these people. I don't know how we have quotes from 1200 years ago, but here it is. I have conquered for you a large empire, but my life was too short to take the whole world. That I leave to you. And that's supposedly what he said to his son Ogadai, who,
Hmm.
believe it or not, a lot of people think that his empire just collapsed as soon as he died and he was the
Yeah.
only thing that held it together. And this isn't really true.
No,
Kevin, you
he
had
had
some
set up.
insight?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
had set up a um a complicated judicial system and justice system that people liked. They liked that, and things were actually safe in the places that he had ruled, and his empire didn't even reach its full size until almost 80 years after he had died, because his successors did a good job in conquering and in ruling. And that's a little bit wild because it was in the 1600s actually when the
Yeah.
last Khans died out. They had made it, another 500 years, um, ruling massive empires, and you know it you know it had really stabilized most of Asia and Eurasia, um, for a long time, based on how well he was at being an administrator. Oftentimes, a conqueror and an administrator are not the same thing, and they're not good at the same things.
Right.
But he was able to do both and actually set up a long line of success. And honestly, a lot of the Chinese government uh, are still descendants of Genghis Khan, even today. I'm
So,
not sure about Xi Jinping, but you know,
but I feel like if you have a hand in everything, then doesn't your empire really live?
mm,
Right? Uh,
right,
they always say, we always talk about the weird bloodline, how George Bush and everybody's related
right.
and
They're
the
all related.
Clintons,
Yeah,
and
George
they're all
Bush is the 13th
maybe
cousin or cousin,
right,
13 times removed from the Queen of England.
right.
Who?
Maybe
So,
maybe it's all really coming from the Khan. If we can dig back far enough. I
hmm
haven't really checked into the genealogy, but I feel like there could be a hand here.
right.
It may really come back. Now, I was talking to the wife, and she's like, "Oh, but what's left?" And well, I have to point out, Mongolia is still a giant
Still
country.
exists. Yeah.
It's still a nice place, and you can go visit there. Now, I would also point out
It's
the reason that they have China on a border and Russia on a border, and those countries are like down for seizing land and everything all the time. Why would they not be after Mongolia? Well, because there's kind of nothing there. It
yeah.
is
It's
the Gobi Desert is kind of
yeah.
a giant desert.
It's not a
Um,
great place to live.
like I
Yeah.
said, it's
And
hard and it's brutal.
they actually
But yeah,
offered the Mongolian uh, government actually offered to become part of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is like, nah,
yeah, we're
that's not
good.
really.
Yeah,
We're
we're
good.
gonna have to like send you something, and
Yeah.
I don't even want to send a guy down there to talk to you. We'll just leave it.
Now, an interesting thing about modern day Mongolia is if you look at the most popular sports of
Yeah,
the world, most of Europe it's soccer. The United States, I think it's football right now. A lot of countries are really into track and field type events. But if you go to Mongolia, the most popular sport is archery,
yeah.
and they have a different way of archery, a different way of shooting than we do in Europe. Um, when you shoot an arrow, I know Chuck, you're into archery a little bit. My son's into it. You use your index and your middle finger and your thumb to hold the arrow as you draw back. But the Mongolians only they would pinch it between their thumb and their forefinger, and they have a different way of firing their arrows than most of the rest of the world. And it's kind of interesting. And like I kind of tempted and start learning how they did it because
Well,
obviously it worked.
it worked. That's the bottom line. I did look at some vacation and travel. Now my wife is like, "Oh, we have to go to Italy. We have to go to Scotland,"
Doesn't
and
want
I'm
to go
like,
to Mongolia.
"Mongolia."
Yeah,
And it turned out it's not as cheap as you might think.
really.
Now, I didn't even bother to look up like the airfare to there because I already got shot down before I even.
Right.
But
Before you
bottom
start
line,
looking into it.
if you search Mongolian tours, there are they're basically pretty much all of them seem to be about $2,500 a person to ride around in a four-wheel drive with somebody and go hang out in a couple yurts and look at people in fields and drive
hmm
around the desert. And I feel like, are those accommodations really worth $2,500 a person?
But when else will you have a chance to drink yak milk?
That's
You know what I
true.
mean? How
But
often do you eat yak? It doesn't
when
come up
you see it,
very often.
it's pretty amazing country. When you look
Mm,
at the video and stuff of the land, it really is beautiful and awesome. And so, as Kevin mentioned, they have this. You were talking about the sports. They
right.
have this like event that's like 12 to 17 days. I think it was 17 days long. And it's just amazing. And it's the archery and the horseback riding and the whole thing. There is no Disney World. I do believe you can get the fermented mare's milk, though.
Yeah, I
That
would
is
like to get
available.
drunk on rotten milk. That seems
Right.
super
That
exciting to
is
me.
their thing, and you got that there. So I did watch actually a little while ago. I was just sometimes at work I get bored and I watch anything I can find on Netflix or whatever. There was a movie called Burn Your Maps,
Right,
and it was about a little kid who thinks he's Mongolian, and he's like, whatever, and he ends up going to Mongolia, and they do kind of a big thing. And that was one of the first, times I'd really looked into it and seen, kind of the scenery and landscape and the whole thing of it all. I'd seen yurts and whatever. I mean, this is
right.
nothing, new to me, but I'd never really looked into their culture and that whole thing. And they really capture it, and it's pretty amazing. They have some awesome stuff going on out there, and if money's no object and you have time, it probably would be worth the trip
Hmm.
and something amazing. But I know there's a lot of things we want to do in life. So,
Right.
we all have our thing. But I'm just saying, you might want to check out the movie. It was actually pretty decent, little touchy feely, and a little tear in your eye or something. You'd be like, oh, that's nice. And that's how I get, that and the Hallmark channel.
Yeah. And if you have a chance, go online and look up uh the statue that they made of Genghis Khan in
Yeah, and you can
Mongolia.
go see
It's
that.
amazing. It is amazing.
Well, you saw
It's
that our
massive.
intro photo, the cover. Did
Hmm.
you see the beginning?
Yeah, no, it was on there. Yeah. Yeah.
We
So
got you.
it's impressive. Just pictures of it online
Yeah.
is impressive. I imagine being there would be interesting. I'd definitely like to go see it if I had a chance.
All I'm saying, he definitely earned the title Genghis Khan, Emperor of all men. So you may want to check it out. You may want to look a little more into what's going on there. Definitely a fascinating guy. It's a crazy world. So, anyway, don't forget to like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave reviews, something like that. We appreciate it. Share, tell people about the podcast, share it with other people. That'd be awesome. We'd appreciate it. Um, anyway, you can get badass gear. Join the email list at preppingbadass.com. You have questions, concerns, things you want to tell us.
Yeah.
Tell Kevin he's wrong, whatever it is.
Yeah. Also,
Preppingbadass at gmail.com.
yep.
Go ahead.
Also, like Slow Burn had said, if you're really interested in Genghis Khan, Dan Carlin Court History put out a couple of episodes of I think it was called The Wrath of the Khans. Um, and if you're interested in like 16 hours of learning about Genghis Khan, that's definitely a go-to. It's fascinating. He did a really good job putting those
Now,
episodes together, and
is he as
good.
entertaining as we are, though? Really?
I don't know. He talks a lot about Lord of the Rings and stuff. So I mean,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
you're into is
But
what
as
you're
far as
into.
facts and information, I kind of feel like when you listen to us, it's kind of like drunk history. I always worry about that.
Yep.
All right.
Whatever. I
But
mean, you thought this coffee cup was full of coffee, but it was whiskey.
yeah, it's an ugly road. So with
Hmm.
that, stay safe, and we will talk to you guys next week.
All right.